Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on, well, a really monumental historical journey. It's one that asks a question almost as vast as the entity we're exploring.
Hmm.
You've definitely heard that legendary phrase, the empire on which the sun never sets.
Oh, yeah, everyone knows that.
Exactly. And it conjures this incredible image, doesn't it? Seemingly unstoppable global reach, a power that literally spanned continents, time zones.
Right across the globe.
And at its absolute peak, the British Empire was precisely that, controlling what, roughly a quarter of the world's landmass?
Astonishing. And governing over 400 million people.
Just think about that scale for a moment. The sheer, almost unimaginable magnitude of it.
It's a truly staggering figure, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you really consider the scope, this intricate web of territories stretching across every single longitude,
Yeah.
what compels you to pause?
Right.
And that's the core question we're trying to dissect today. How did such an immense dominant empire, a true global powerhouse, the largest in recorded history, how did it dwindle down?
Yeah, dwindled down to basically a single island and some scattered territories. On the surface, it seems almost impossible, doesn't it, for something so vast, so deeply entrenched to just recede.
Fade away almost.
Exactly. And that's the heart of our mission today. We're going on a fascinating, really intricate deep dive. We want to look into the forces, both internal pressures and external catalysts that led to the British Empire's eventual and, well, surprisingly rapid collapse.
It wasn't slow, was it, in the grand scheme of things?
Not really when you look at the final decades. So we're not just going to recount dates. We're going to try and cut through the noise, maybe examine some surprising facts you might not know, and uncover the complex interplay of events that not only shaped this empire, but by extension, profoundly shaped the modern world you and I live in today.
Absolutely.
So our mission is to unpack that incredible, almost mythical rise, and then the equally dramatic, often tumultuous decline of this global powerhouse, drawing from the detailed sources and research you've shared with us. So let's unpack this.
Okay, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, and really crucial for understanding its decline, is that we first need to understand the improbable story of its ascent.
Right. Where did it even come from?
Exactly. Britain wasn't always this global colossus, this titan of naval power. If you look back before, say, the 15th or even early 16th century, it was a relatively small, quite isolated island nation, often just consumed by its own internal strife. Its gaze was overwhelmingly inward, really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just consider the backdrop of something like the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Not some minor dynastic squabble, right? This was a brutal, decades-long, intermittent civil war.
Sure.
A really intense period of political instability, this vicious struggle between rival factions, the houses of Lancaster and York, fighting for the throne. It essentially kept England preoccupied with itself, just bleeding resources and attention internally. It's such a stark contrast, almost unbelievable, to the outward expansionist, globe-spanning power it would later become.
It really illustrates how a nation's internal state, its basic stability or lack thereof, can really dictate its capacity for projecting power beyond its own borders.
If you're fighting at home, you can't really look outwards.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That prolonged internal conflict, or rather the lack of internal stability, severely limited England's ability to even think about any significant overseas expansion. The focus was survival, consolidation at home.
Okay.
However, once that internal conflict began to settle down, particularly with the rise of the formidable Tudor dynasty,
Right.
a new and profoundly ambitious vision for England's future started to emerge. And this was a vision that looked outward towards the sea.
And that vision, if we're talking about global power and security, it really started with something incredibly fundamental, naval might.
Yes.
King Henry VIII, the one famous for his 6 wives and the English Reformation,
That guy.
he actually possessed remarkable strategic foresight. He recognized that a strong, standing navy wasn't just important for defense, it was absolutely critical
Crucial.
for national security and for any future power projection, protecting trade, and ultimately imperial ambitions. He poured significant, really unprecedented resources into building up England's fleet.
Moving away from just hiring merchant ships when needed.
Exactly, towards a purpose-built fighting force.
Yet, despite these, visionary investments, it's absolutely vital to remember that Britain was initially still very much an underdog on the global maritime stage.
Really? Even with Henry's investment?
Oh, yeah. They were profoundly overshadowed by the established naval powers of the time, Spain and Portugal.
Okay, the big players.
Those were the true giants. They were already actively carving up the globe, exploring new continents, establishing vast, wealthy empires from the Americas to Asia, long before England was even a blip on the imperial radar. Britain was playing a desperate game of catch-up, and honestly, the odds seemed stacked against them.
Okay, so here's where it gets truly, truly interesting, though. The pivotal shift. The moment that dramatically announced England's arrival as a major maritime force. That happened under Henry VIII's daughter, right? The formidable Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes, the Spanish Armada.
The decisive, almost miraculous victory over the invincible Spanish Armada.
That victory in 1588, it was nothing short of transformational. A true turning point in European history.
Wow.
Spain, then the superpower of its age, had assembled what they genuinely believed was an unstoppable fleet. Over 130 ships, the largest naval force ever seen.
Just massive.
And the plan was to invade England, crush its nascent Protestantism and its growing maritime challenge.
Right.
England, with its newly strengthened but still, developing navy, managed to repel them. They were aided significantly by fierce storms, that's true.
The Protestant wind, they called it.
Exactly. But also by superior English naval tactics that favored sort of maneuverability over brute force.
Smaller, faster ships.
Right. So it wasn't just a military victory. It was a profound psychological one. It didn't just firmly establish England's naval supremacy. Just as importantly, it shattered the myth of Spanish invincibility across Europe.
And you can vividly see the symbolism of this victory reflected in Queen Elizabeth I's portraits from that era.
Oh, yeah, they made sure of that.
If you look closely at many of them, particularly the iconic Armada portrait, you'll often see these powerful depictions of ships. Sometimes the defeated Spanish fleet is right there in the background.
Not very subtle.
Not subtle at all. Symbolizing this incredible naval triumph and her, newfound dominion over the seas. That undeniable naval dominance directly paved the way for ambitious overseas exploration, setting up trade routes, and eventually large-scale colonization.
You need that sea power.
Absolutely. Without control of the seas, a global empire was simply a fantasy.
And with that newfound confidence and, crucially, the naval capability finally secured, Britain could truly take its first concrete, significant steps in the New World.
Which brings us to, 1607? And the precarious establishment of Jamestown,
Virginia.
the first permanent English colony in America. And it's absolutely crucial to remember, just for perspective, Britain wasn't the pioneer here.
No, not at all.
Spain and Portugal were the original discoverers and colonizers in the Americas. They'd established vast empires more than a century earlier. Britain was a decided latecomer to the imperial party.
Which makes its rapid, dramatic ascent to global power all the more remarkable, maybe?
And maybe more aggressive in some ways.
Well, yes. And this late start, as you rightly point out, in a way profoundly shaped their strategy. They couldn't just rely on brute military force everywhere to carve out territory.
Because others were already there.
Exactly. Other European powers already had firmly established strongholds, competing claims across the globe. So this led to a remarkably unique and, from a British perspective, rather ingenious, though ultimately ruthless, approach.
Okay.
The hybrid model of trade and power.
You're talking, of course, about the British East India Company, right? The BEIC. This wasn't just some ordinary trading company, was it?
Not even close. This was a commercial entity that blurred the lines between pure commerce and outright conquest in a way that was uniquely, profoundly British and incredibly effective.
How so?
Well, the BEIC wasn't merely involved in trading spices, textiles, or tea. It possessed its own formidable private army.
Its own army.
Yes, it administered vast territories across India. It even collected taxes from millions of subjects. It was, in essence, a quasi-governmental entity operating with immense autonomy.
Like a privatized empire.
Almost exactly that, yes. Wielding sovereign powers in a way that no other trading company truly matched. This allowed Britain to gain immense influence and direct control in regions where direct military conquest by the crown might have been too challenging or just prohibitively costly.
Especially with other Europeans already there.
Right. Like the French or Portuguese in India, they could sort of trade their way into power, then consolidate with overwhelming military force once established. And often the financial risk was borne by shareholders, not the British taxpayer initially.
That's clever. Ruthless, but clever.
The real insight here, I think, is how the British perfected a model where corporate profit was seamlessly intertwined with state power.
Okay.
creating an entity that was essentially a privatized empire. This wasn't just efficient, it allowed them to bypass traditional diplomatic hurdles and expand at an unprecedented rate. It set a precedent for powerful non-state actors that you could argue echoes even in today's global economy.
Wow. Okay. And to rationalize all of this aggressive expansion, this forceful takeover of lands and peoples, there was this powerful and deeply insidious ideology that emerged. It became famously, or perhaps infamously, known as the white man's burden.
Yes, this was a deeply controversial yet incredibly influential concept. It serves as the self-proclaimed moral justification for British imperialism, popularized by Rudyard Kipling's poem.
Right, Kipling.
The core belief was that the British, as a supposedly civilized and superior people, had a moral obligation, or maybe more accurately, a perceived inherent right, to spread their culture, their governance, their religion, their way of life,
To impose it, really.
to what they condescendingly deemed less civilized peoples around the world. This provided a powerful, albeit ethically dubious and, let's be honest, ultimately racist, veneer of legitimacy to their overtly expansionist and exploitative goals. It really highlights how ideologies are often meticulously constructed, aren't they, to rationalize and legitimize profound power dynamics and historical actions, no matter how exploitative or violent they might be in reality.
So, armed with this naval might, this ingenious hybrid commercial conquest approach, and this justifying ideology, Britain entered a period of intense consolidation and expansion.
Yeah, things really took off.
The 7 Years' War, for instance, that was a truly global conflict fought across continents.
Europe, North America, India.
And it was absolutely crucial in cementing British power. It led to significant territorial gains like Canada and a massive, decisive increase in influence in India, effectively sidelining their French rivals.
Can't say no French out, yeah.
Britain was truly on a roll, seemingly unstoppable.
But then, even at this height of their early power, they hit their first truly major setback, a profound blow that would force a reevaluation of their whole imperial strategy.
You mean American independence?
American independence in 1776. The 13 colonies, fueled by simmering grievances like, the infamous Boston Tea Party, excessive taxation without representation.
No taxation without representation.
Right, and a growing sense of distinct identity. They finally declare their independence, sparking a brutal war.
And this wasn't just a minor loss, was it? This marked the dramatic end of what historians often call the First British Empire, which was largely focused on the Americas.
Absolutely. It was humiliating, costly. It forced Britain to fundamentally reevaluate its entire imperial strategy and pivot its ambitions elsewhere.
And what's crucial here, I think, is that it profoundly demonstrated that even a vast, seemingly unshakable colonial power could be challenged. And indeed, overthrown by an organized, determined populace. It set a powerful, inspiring precedent for future independence movements across the globe, showed the potential fragility of even the mightiest empires.
It was a painful lesson. Expensive, too. Cost Britain immense prestige, territory, wealth. But paradoxically, it was a lesson that ultimately propelled them into what would become the true golden age of the empire.
How so?
It prompted a redirection of their formidable energies and capabilities towards new targets.
Okay, so after the stinging, costly loss of the American colonies, Britain didn't just retreat into isolation.
Far from it.
They simply and ruthlessly turned their imperial gaze towards new, perhaps even richer horizons. This meant shifting their focus dramatically.
What to?
To the incredibly resource-rich and densely populated regions of Asia, the Pacific, and the vast continent of Africa.
Right. And this strategic pivot was significantly influenced by tumultuous events closer to home, too. The Napoleonic Wars. Specifically, Napoleon's rampant expansionist ambitions across Europe. This paradoxically spurred British colonization further afield.
How did that work?
Well, Britain felt compelled to secure more territories globally, not just for resources, but as a strategic imperative. To maintain its position as the preeminent world power, and crucially, to prevent its European rivals, especially France, from gaining too much ground.
So, a global chess game.
Exactly. If France was expanding fiercely in Europe, Britain needed to expand elsewhere to maintain that global balance of power and secure vital supply lines.
And this period led to an era of truly unprecedented dominance, didn't it? From roughly 1815, after Napoleon's final defeat,
Waterloo, yeah.
right up to the eve of World War I in 1914. This century saw a profound shift from that kind of proxy influence we saw with the BEIC
Right, the company rule.
to direct, outright annexation of truly vast territories.
Precisely. India, for instance, transitioned from being under the BAIC's powerful but still indirect influence to direct British Raj rule. The Raj itself is a Hindi word meaning rule or kingdom, and its adoption signaled a definitive shift. Direct governmental control from London, not through a commercial enterprise.
Okay.
Singapore was established as a critical strategic trading post in Southeast Asia. Hong Kong was acquired from China after the Opium Wars.
Right.
These weren't just trading outposts anymore. They were directly incorporated into the empire, ruled by British administrators. This era truly was the absolute zenith of British power.
The peak.
It was then that the phrase, "the sun never sets on the British Empire," became not just a saying, but a literal geographical truth. The empire at this point was unequivocally the largest in recorded history, covering an astounding 1/4 of the world's land mass and population.
Just incredible. And it wasn't just about direct, overt territorial control, was it? There was also this incredibly pervasive, sort of invisible, informal empire.
Yes, that's a crucial point. Britain's immense influence extended through strategic trade agreements, financial leverage, shrewd diplomacy, even in regions they didn't directly govern.
Like what?
Well, think about places like China in the late 19th century. While never directly colonized, British control over key treaty ports, trade treaties that overwhelmingly favor them, massive financial loans. It meant that Beijing's economic and even political decisions were often dictated from London.
Wow.
Creating a de facto sphere of influence without the administrative cost or military burden of direct rule. Similarly, countries like Argentina, Siam, modern-day Thailand, they were never formally annexed but couldn't really make significant decisions without British approval due to overwhelming economic ties.
So different ways of controlling things.
It's a crucial distinction. Really shows the sophistication of British imperial strategy. You had direct control, outright annexation, full governance, military occupation, and then you had indirect influence or informal empire operating through economic leverage, diplomatic pressure, cultural soft power. Both were incredibly powerful tools. But the informal empire allowed Britain to exert control with fewer administrative and military costs, maintaining vast influence without the direct responsibility of governing every single square mile. This dual approach maximized their global reach with surprising efficiency.
All right, so we've seen the incredible, almost dizzying ascent, the true golden age where the sun literally never set. Now let's pivot to the unraveling.
The beginning of the end.
Because even at its absolute peak, the seeds of decline were subtly being sown. And some of those early cracks were internal strains growing from within the very fabric of the empire.
Yeah, I think one of the most significant yet often overlooked factors was simply the sheer scale. The scale of the empire combined with the burgeoning global population growth from the late 19th into the 20th century.
Just too big to manage.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Governing such a vast, incredibly diverse empire with its rapidly increasing and crucially increasingly restive populations, it just became an administrative nightmare. And more importantly, increasingly costly and resource-intensive to maintain. The weight of its own size was starting to become a real burden.
And this led to an early, somewhat pragmatic and decidedly strategic shift in imperial strategy, didn't it? We see the very early form of what would eventually become the British Commonwealth.
That's right. Britain started granting limited self-governance to some of its predominantly white settler colonies.
Like Canada, Australia?
Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. These were seen as, well, more aligned culturally and politically. Therefore, safer bets for partial autonomy. Now, this was initially presented as a progressive, almost benevolent step towards autonomy and self-determination, a sign of Britain's enlightened approach, But it was also a very pragmatic, arguably cynical move. Yeah. By granting a degree of self-rule, allowing these territories to manage their own domestic affairs, Britain could significantly streamline administration, reduce the direct financial burden of governance.
Cut costs.
Exactly. And still maintain crucial symbolic, economic, and strategic ties through the acceptance of the British monarch as the head of state. It was a cunning way to manage the unwieldy beast that the empire had become, shifting from outright costly control to a more nuanced, less burdensome form of influence and affiliation.
Okay. But then came World War I. And this is where the cracks really, truly began to show and deepen.
A massive catalyst.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The profound, unforeseen impact of hundreds of thousands of colonial subjects being drafted, often forcibly,
from all over the empire.
to fight in the trenches of Europe for an empire that wasn't truly theirs.
This experience was profoundly transformative for millions of colonial soldiers, from India, Africa, the Caribbean, beyond. These men, who had largely lived their entire lives within their often isolated colonial borders, suddenly gained exposure to the outside world, to different cultures, and most critically, to the raw realities of European power.
Seeing it up close.
They fought shoulder to shoulder with and against Europeans. They witnessed British vulnerabilities firsthand, the loss of life, the logistical chaos, the sheer brutality of modern warfare. The carefully cultivated myth of British invincibility, of their inherent superiority,
Started to crumble.
it really began to crumble as they saw their colonial masters struggling, suffering, and often not treating their colonial troops as well as other nations treated their own soldiers. This direct exposure to racial discrimination, unfair pay, the sheer human cost of imperial wars, it fostered deep, festering resentment.
And that direct exposure to the war, coupled with the undeniable perceived weaknesses of the colonizer, fueled a powerful, unstoppable rise of nationalist sentiment back home.
Absolutely. These soldiers, having fought and bled for the empire, returned home not as loyal subjects, but as men with a new understanding of their colonizers' fragility and a burning desire for self-rule.
But it wasn't just the soldiers either, was it?
No, you also had indigenous elites, often educated in Europe. Think figures like Gandhi or Nehru.
Right, educated in Britain often.
Exactly. They had absorbed powerful ideas of self-determination, liberty, nationhood. They returned to their home countries with sophisticated political tools and a profound commitment to lead powerful, often mass independence movements.
So this potent combination, grassroots resentment, returning disillusioned soldiers, educated nationalist elites.
It led to the early, significant waves of independence movements immediately following World War I. Afghanistan, for example, was one of the earliest nations to achieve its full independence, fiercely asserting its sovereignty.
Then there's the incredibly significant and deeply complex case of Ireland.
Always complex.
Following decades of nationalist struggle and the Easter Rising, Southern Ireland finally gained independence in 1922, establishing the Irish Free State. However,
The North remained.
the North, predominantly Protestant and Unionist, remained part of the United Kingdom, creating a lasting political and cultural divide that continues to echo even today, especially with the complexities around Brexit.
Still relevant.
And Egypt. You mentioned partial independence there.
Yes, Egypt. After widespread protests and a growing nationalist movement, Britain was forced to grant partial self-governance in 1922. But it wasn't full independence.
What did Britain keep?
Britain strategically retained crucial control over the vital Suez Canal, a lifeline to India and the East, and maintained significant military and foreign policy influence. This demonstrates a grudging, incomplete decolonization, a clear sign of Britain desperately clinging to strategic power where it could.
Trying to manage the decline, maybe?
It was a delicate and often violent balancing act for Britain, trying to concede just enough to quell widespread unrest without entirely relinquishing strategically vital assets. But while these external pressures, internal rebellions, the rising tide of nationalism were mounting, the empire's core was arguably rotting from within.
How so?
The crushing economic collapse. The immense cost of 2 world wars was arguably the true death knell.
Okay, let's talk economics. The cost of World War I, first and foremost.
Immense. An absolutely immense financial drain on the British treasury. Britain had financed the war largely through borrowing, accumulating colossal debts.
Right.
This severely weakened their ability to maintain such a vast and incredibly expensive empire, which required constant military garrisons, administrative infrastructure, public works, all cost money.
And then, almost immediately after that recovery period, came the devastating global economic downturn.
The Great Depression, late 1920s, 1930s. This unprecedented economic collapse further exacerbated Britain's already dire financial woes, left it with very little capital to administer, develop, and control its distant colonies, many of which were themselves suffering economically.
An empire costs money to run.
Exactly. At its heart, an empire is an incredibly expensive undertaking. It requires constant investment in administration, infrastructure, and a pervasive military presence to maintain control. When the treasury is empty, maintaining that presence becomes simply unsustainable. Britain's once unchallengeable financial supremacy was severely eroded.
And if WWI was a heavy, crippling blow, World War II.
That was the final, devastating existential punch. Unlike WWI, which largely spared the British home front from direct attack.
Right, fighting was elsewhere.
WWII saw Britain itself heavily bombed and attacked by Nazi Germany during the Blitz, Cities were razed, industries crippled. The country was truly devastated, both economically and psychologically.
A different kind of war.
And the war, fought to defend the very notion of freedom and democracy, left Britain utterly and completely bankrupt.
Bankrupt.
Utterly. They were forced to borrow heavily, accumulating a massive debt over £3.5 billion, mostly from the United States. This effectively shifted the global financial center of gravity from London to Washington.
Wow.
With a shattered economy, a depleted workforce, an overwhelming national debt, Britain simply could not afford to suppress the surging independence movements across its empire, many of whom had fought alongside Britain against fascism, remember.
Right, the irony.
So decolonization became not just a moral imperative given the principles of self-determination, but an unavoidable economic and strategic inevitability. Financial weakness ultimately directly undermines an empire's viability and its ability to project power. It was a strategic dilemma with a clear, unavoidable answer. The empire could no longer be maintained.
So, with the economic backbone broken, the military stretched thin, and nationalist fervor sweeping through every corner of the colonies, the dam finally broke.
It really did.
We saw this rapid cascade of decolonization, with nations across the globe asserting their independence. Let's look at some key case studies, starting, of course, with the crown jewel of the empire, India.
India was truly monumental, perhaps the most significant loss. It had been a colossal source of revenue, raw materials, manpower for Britain for centuries, often called the jewel in the crown. Post-WWII, the discontent with British rule was massive, widespread, undeniable, fueled by both the war's demands and the promises of self-determination. And there were multiple powerful movements pushing for independence, led by diverse, often clashing figures.
You had Mahatma Gandhi, obviously, with his incredibly powerful philosophy of nonviolent resistance, uniting millions. You had Jawaharlal Nehru, a visionary who'd become India's first prime minister, advocating for a united, secular India. And then there was Muhammad Ali Jinnah,
advocating intensely for a separate Muslim state, Pakistan, fearing marginalization in a Hindu-majority India. These internal dynamics were incredibly complex and at times violently divisive, especially after Britain's hasty announcement of withdrawal.
Hasty.
Well, Britain, feeling overwhelmed and unable to control the escalating internal conflicts and communal violence that tragically flared up between Hindu and Muslim communities in the immediate post-war period, they made the agonizing and ultimately, yes, hasty decision to grant independence.
And the result?
The rushed withdrawal, without sufficient planning for such deep-seated communal divisions, led to the agonizing, bloody partition of India and Pakistan.
Right, partition.
A truly horrific event. Immense human suffering, millions displaced in mass migrations, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, dying in accompanying violence. Its legacy continues to shape geopolitical issues and tensions in South Asia to this day.
And from a purely strategic perspective, losing India.
Catastrophic, an absolutely catastrophic blow. It wasn't just about the immense revenue and resources. It meant losing a critical strategic outpost for controlling the Indian Ocean trade routes, a linchpin of Britain's global military and economic power.
Yet, despite the bitter partition, the painful legacy of colonial rule, both newly independent India and Pakistan chose to join the Commonwealth.
Yes, perhaps surprisingly. It indicates a complex desire, I think, to maintain some ties, albeit on their own terms. Pragmatism, perhaps?
Okay. Moving to Southeast Asia, similar patterns there. Negotiated but often violent transitions.
Yes, quite similar. Myanmar, formerly Burma, for instance. It initially joined the Commonwealth after its independence, but later fully withdrew.
Why?
Due to its own profound internal instability and a desire for complete self-reliance, signifying a rare, complete break from its colonial past.
Then there were the street settlements, particularly the complex situation surrounding the Malayan emergency.
Ah, yes, a brutal conflict from 1948 to 1960, pitting British and Commonwealth forces against communist insurgents in Malaya.
A long war.
Costly, exhausting. It truly forced Britain's hand. The immense military and financial burden, coupled with growing nationalist sentiment, necessitated granting independence to Malaya, now Malaysia and later Singapore.
But that wasn't smooth either, was it? Singapore separating from Malaysia.
No. Even after independence, Britain's legacy of divide and rule and its inability to effectively reconcile the significant ethnic tensions between the majority Malay and minority Chinese communities, That ultimately led to Singapore's eventual and somewhat abrupt separation from Malaysia in 1965. Despite this internal tension and separation, both Malaysia and Singapore joined the Commonwealth. Again, choosing to retain certain economic and diplomatic ties shows the pragmatic value of this new association, maybe.
Okay. The Arab world also saw a dramatic, decisive shift, epitomized by the Suez Crisis.
Oh, Suez, a huge moment. Egypt, despite achieving that nominal independence way back in 1922, was still heavily influenced by Britain, especially through British and French control of the Suez Canal.
Why was the canal so important?
An absolutely vital artery for global shipping. And crucially, for Britain's oil supplies and trade routes to its remaining Asian territories.
Right. So what happened?
Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser's bold, audacious move to nationalize the Suez Canal in 1956.
Tuck it over.
Yes. A direct, undeniable challenge to British authority. A symbolic reclaiming of national sovereignty. This act sparked an intense international crisis.
Who got involved?
Drew in other global powers, particularly the United States and the Soviet Union. Both opposed the Anglo-French-Israeli intervention that followed Nasser's move. Ultimately, immense diplomatic pressure from the U.S., backed by economic threats.
The U.S. leaned on Britain.
Heavily. Forced Britain and France to withdraw. This was a major symbolic moment, a clear demonstration that Britain could no longer unilaterally dictate terms on the world stage. Nor could it act without the approval of the emerging superpowers.
A real shift in power.
A profound psychological blow. Marked a visible, irreversible shift in the world order, showcased Britain's dependence on American power, and fundamentally redefined its global standing. From a unilateral force to, well, a secondary player.
The African continent also experienced intense decolonization, often marked by violent uprisings against colonial rule and problematic British responses.
Yes, the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, for example, 1952 to 1960. A brutal rebellion by the Kikuyu people against European landowners and the British colonial government, rooted in grievances over land, economic exploitation, political rights.
And the British response?
Equally, if not more, brutal. Harsh suppression tactics, mass detentions in camps, significant human rights abuses, torture, forced labor.
That sounds horrific.
It was. And it severely damaged Britain's international reputation, especially as a global awareness of such atrocities grew through media and international organizations. This negative publicity, the immense financial and military costs of suppressing the rebellion, growing global pressure, it all ultimately hastened the process of granting independence to various African colonies throughout the late 1950s and 1960s.
When did the last major African colony go?
Southern Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe, was the last major one. Gained its independence in 1980, marked the near completion of African decolonization, the final dismantling of the Continental Empire.
But decolonization wasn't uniform across the globe, you said. In the Americas and the Caribbean, it was different.
Often, yes. Smoother, more gradual transitions to independence. Countries like Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, many others in the region, they moved towards independence in a less violent, more constitutionally managed manner.
How did Britain manage that?
In these regions, Britain often facilitated a more gradual transfer of power through establishing local constitutions, devolving power over time, creating self-governing bodies, allowed for a more managed, orderly decolonization process.
Why the difference?
It reflected different local dynamics, I think, the specific economic and strategic value of those colonies, perhaps, and evolving British calculations about the costs and benefits of maintaining direct control. It's a testament to the fact that while the empire dissolved, it wasn't a single uniform process. It was a complex tapestry of unique transitions.
So, with the empire dissolving piece by piece, region by region, there was immense, undeniable global pressure for decolonization.
Huge pressure. After WWII, the very concept of empires became increasingly outdated, morally questionable, internationally unacceptable in the New World Order.
And the new superpowers played a role.
Precisely. The emerging superpowers of the Cold War era, the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite their ideological differences, both pushed fiercely for decolonization, albeit for their own strategic reasons.
What were their reasons?
Well, the U.S. generally promoted self-determination, democratic ideals, viewed European empires as anachronisms that hindered global trade, fostered instability. The Soviets, on the other hand, aimed to expand communist influence by actively supporting anti-colonial movements, presenting themselves as champions of liberation against Western imperialism.
So they both benefited from the old empires collapsing.
Absolutely. In their own ways, they both benefited profoundly from the weakening and eventual dismantling of traditional European empires, created a new geopolitical landscape for them to compete in.
In the United Nations.
The UN, formed after the war with its charter emphasizing self-determination and human rights, strongly advocated for an end to colonial rule, put immense moral, political, even economic pressure on imperial powers like Britain to finally let go, grant sovereignty.
Okay, so with the reality of decolonization undeniable and global pressure mounting, Britain shrewdly pivoted its approach once again. This led to the remarkable evolution of the British Commonwealth into the Commonwealth of Nations.
A reimagined legacy of the empire, yes.
How did it change?
It transformed from a system of sort of lingering imperial control into a genuinely voluntary association of independent sovereign states.
And it offered real benefits.
Oh, yes. Tangible benefits to its member nations. Diplomatic ties, preferential trade advantages, deep cultural connections, often with educational and professional opportunities.
Like the example you mentioned.
Right. The sources mentioned a Bangladeshi YouTuber who received a prestigious award directly from Queen Elizabeth II simply for contributing to education within the Commonwealth. Highlights the enduring, practical benefits of belonging to this unique network.
So how many members are there now?
Today, the Commonwealth is a diverse body comprising 56 member countries, represents over 2.5 billion people.
Wow. And the relationship with the British monarchy varies.
Widely. Some members, like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, numerous Caribbean nations, still recognize the British monarch as their head of state, maintaining that symbolic link to the crown.
But others don't.
Right. Others, like Malaysia and Brunei, have their own national monarchies. And many, perhaps most, have become republics, having removed the British monarch as head of state entirely, electing their own presidents, like India, for example.
What's truly fascinating about the Commonwealth, though, is that it has evolved far beyond just former colonies.
Yes, this is key. It now actively accepts countries with absolutely no historical colonial ties to the British Empire at all.
Like who?
We're talking about nations like Mozambique, Rwanda, Gabon, Togo joining, purely seeking mutual benefits in trade, diplomacy, shared values. Demonstrates its adaptability and perhaps continuing relevance in the 21st century.
But its future isn't guaranteed.
No. The future of the Commonwealth, its continued relevance, has been openly debated by some member nations, particularly after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, a figure who really embodied its continuity for decades. It raises important questions about its continued purpose, its identity in a post-colonial world, and whether it can truly shed its imperial past for a forward-looking, equitable future. These are ongoing discussions shaping its destiny.
And finally, we arrive at the symbolic, almost theatrical, official end of the British Empire.
The final curtain call.
This poignant moment happened on July 1st, 1997, the Hong Kong handover.
Yeah, I remember watching that. On that historic night, Prince Charles, now King Charles III, traveled to Hong Kong to formally hand it back to China.
Why then?
The expiration of a 99-year lease that had been signed way back in 1898.
The lease ran out.
Exactly. This highly publicized, meticulously choreographed event was widely considered a final curtain call for the vast British Empire, a poignant, definitive moment marking the end of an extraordinary, transformative period in world history. It was literally the last significant colonial territory to be returned, a very visible closing of a centuries-long chapter.
So we've journeyed from a small, internally conflicted island nation to a global empire upon which the sun literally never set, and then traced its eventual, complex, often painful decolonization.
Quite a journey.
We've seen how this confluence of factors from strategic naval power, ingenious economic models like the BEIC, overwhelming economic strength followed by profound financial weakness, the rise of fierce internal rebellions, and massive global shifts in power dynamics all played their crucial intertwined roles in this epic rise and fall.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that the British Empire's story is a profound microcosm. A microcosm of broader geopolitical forces, human endeavors. Its rise demonstrates the incredible power of innovation, ruthless strategy, self-justifying ideologies. Its dramatic decline, however, reveals the inherent fragility of even the greatest, most entrenched powers when faced with overwhelming economic strain, surging nationalism, the universal demand for self-determination, and fundamental shifts in global power dynamics. It's a testament, perhaps, to the enduring human spirit to seek freedom.
So what does this all mean for us today? The lasting, undeniable impact of the British Empire on global politics, economics, cultures. It's still very much present, still shaping our world.
Oh, absolutely.
From the borders drawn across continents that continue to fuel conflicts, to the languages spoken, the legal systems in place, the very structure of global trade, and the ongoing discussions around historical reparations and cultural identity, its legacy profoundly endures even decades after its official end.
Indeed. And it prompts us to consider, given the complex, often contradictory legacy of empire and the ongoing evolution of the Commonwealth, what do you believe is the ultimate measure of a nation's enduring global influence in the modern age?
Good question.
Is it still territorial control? Or purely economic power? Or perhaps something else entirely, like cultural soft power, technological innovation, or moral leadership? What do you think defines true global influence today?
Something profound to ponder as you go about your day. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.